So let us talk about round and flat character. Let us start with flat character. A character is said to be flat when he or she does not undergo changes in the course of the story. The flat character remains the same, or tends to remain the same throughout the story, does not change. Note that the change that we are talking about is mostly psychological and behavioral. So, we use the term static to describe this character. Static. S-T-A-T-I-C. Static. We use the term static to describe this character. So, a flat character is likely to be static, to remain the same throughout the course of the story. The flat character has one dimension to himself or herself. The flat character has one dimension to himself or herself, does not change. It has a single character attribute. The flat character is not fully developed. We don't see all the sides to the character. We do not see all the sides to the character. We can only see one side of the character. That is why the flat character is unidimensional, or you can call it one-dimensional. And the flat character is predictable to a large extent. It's predictable to a large extent. The character does not change. If the character sets out as a good person, the character remains so till the end of the story. And if the character sets out as a bad person, the character remains so until the end of the story. That's what we are talking about. So in character creation, in creative writing, you need to know your character. You need to know the character you're creating. Is it a flat character? If it's a flat character, then you give it all the attributes of the flat character that we've mentioned. Meaning that nothing will change that character. It will remain so from the beginning to the end. Because the flat character has one dimension, it tends to remain the same, tends to be static, tends to be predictable, it's not fully developed. On the other hand, you have the round character. On the other hand, you have the round character. And the round character is a fully developed character, because we are made to see all the sides to the character. The round character is a fully developed character because we are made to see all the sides of the character. We are made to see all the sides of the character. And this character is dynamic. The round character tends to be dynamic in the sense that the character changes in the course of the story, develops alongside the plot, alongside the plot of the story. And remember that the development of the changes are usually psychological and behavioral. Something usually happens in the course of the events that will change the character. So that if the character starts out as dishonest, in the course of the events, the character might change and becomes honest. That's a round character. And a character is rounded because we see all the sides to the character, in that we see different parts of the character. It's not one dimension of the character that we see. We see different faces of the character. So both round character and flat character are central character. a main character. The central character, the main character. Then we have stereotypes. Stereotypes. Some characters are stereotypes. Some characters are stereotypes. Stereotypical characters. Stereotypical characters are type characters. Stereotypical characters are type characters whose roles are based on prejudices and biases. Prejudices and biases that are anchored on age, gender, or race. Age, gender, or race, or ethnicity. Let me explain. If someone is age biased, AGE, the person might feel that young people will not be able to do certain things. All right? And old people will not be able to do certain things. That means the person judges you based on your age. Okay? Yesterday, I was watching a skit on the social media where a man was asking a woman a question, ignoring the child, a student that was standing by. At the end of the day, he has to realize that the mother couldn't answer the question, but it was the child who was able to answer the question. And he was surprised because he had thought that because of the person's age, the person would not be able to answer the question. But the other person, because of her age, will be able to answer because the person was older. But he was shocked to realize that it was actually the person that was younger, smaller, that didn't think he was able to answer the question, who was able to answer the question. He was age biased. Simply look at him and say, you are too small to do this. You can't do this. Okay? Because of your age. Alright, so stereotypical characters are born out of these biases. Okay? Someone can be gender biased. Okay? If the person thinks that because the person is a woman, then the person cannot do certain things. The person is just by virtue of being a woman. Okay? So for instance, you go to a particular place and you see a woman managing a very big and successful shop. And the person that you say is, wow, your husband is a wonderful man for setting up this shop for you. Okay? Because you're biased and you think that the woman cannot do that by herself. Okay? The statement is biased. Because it's based on the judgment that the woman cannot do such a thing by herself. Or you see a woman driving a very posh car, and then you say it is your husband that bought it for you, without knowing that she is capable of doing that. So that is the idea about bias. It's the same thing with race biases, racial bias, where the individual is judged based on their race, like whether they are black or white. Okay, in America, a black person is likely to be judged by the police as a criminal, as a bad person, a gangster. Okay, which is why they are usually shot. Blacks are usually shot. Okay, at the slightest provocation. So stereotypical characters fit into roles already designed for them by society, which are stereotypes. For instance, the woman has to be a nurse, while a man has to be a doctor. Okay? So most likely when someone says, Dr. Johnson is coming, Dr. Johnson is coming. Well, of course, you know that when you use a title, the compulsory name is the surname, right? Yes, good. So someone is saying in the hospital, Dr. Johnson is coming. The next thing you do is, where is he? Without knowing that they're talking about Dr. Alice Johnson. Okay? That is a she. Okay? Because in your mind, you have already been predisposed to believe that the doctor has to be a man. And sometimes they say the nurse is coming. You are expecting the nurse. The next thing you say is, where is she? Okay? Because society has predisposed you to think that the nurse has to be a lady. Okay? So that's stereotypical characterization. So you go to a man's house, to a person's house, and they serve you a delicious meal, and you say, wow, your wife knows how to cook so well, without knowing that it was the man who prepared the meal. Okay? But the societal biases predispose you to think that meal, especially when it is delicious, has to be prepared by the woman, without you stopping to think that, or even know that, the best cooks in the world are men. The best cooks in the world are men. Okay? But that's the truth. Go and do your research. The best cooks in the world are men, not women. So you will see how difficult it is for me to even push you out of your stereotypical beliefs, because you still hang on to the fact that it's a woman that must be the one to prepare the meal, right? And so when I say that the best cooks are men, you are now struggling, that they're taking away your bare rights. Okay? Or someone sees how a family is doing well, the children wear nice clothes, and attend expensive schools, and you say, wow, the man is providing so well for the family. Because you're predisposed to believe that it's the man that provides money for the family, without thinking that probably the woman might be the one providing. So these are stereotypes, molds that society have created to fit different people in, so that they will act their specified role, predictable roles, so that immediately you see them, just by mentioning who they are, you know that this is the role that they are going to play, like call girls, like doctors, like teachers, accountants, bankers. These are roles that have predetermined expectations. Someone appears in the story and is a banker, you really know what the person is going to do. It's a call girl, you really know what the person is going to do. It's a drunk. Okay? For instance, in most stories, it is the men that are likely to be drunk. Women are never drunk. Alright? It's the men that are likely to smoke. Alright? Even though in our time, women smoke more than men. Okay? Okay? So we have women that, in these days, we have women that 24-hour smoke is going up from their head. You understand? Because are they calling vibing or something? Okay, smoke is coming out their nose. Every moment of the day, everything's smoke. And they are ladies. Okay? Let's just look at foil. 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 F-O-I-L. Foil. It's a character type. Foil is a character type. Foil is usually described in relation to another character. Foil is usually described in relation to another character. You cannot define a foil without comparing it to another character. Because a character is a foil because it is opposite another character. Because the character has traits that are in sharp contrast to another character. The character is said to be a foil when his character attributes are in sharp contrast to those of another character. So you are a foil of another character, or you are a foil to another character. You cannot define the foil alone. It has to be in relation to another character and in terms of how this particular character foils the other character. That is different from the other character. That's how you go by. So the foil of a character is the character that is completely different or opposite in behavior to another character. The foil of a character is that character whose traits are in sharp contrast to another character. That is what a foil is. Whose character traits are in sharp contrast to another character. That's what a foil is. So let me give you an example in Things Fall Apart. In Things Fall Apart, you can say that Okonkwo is the foil of Unoka. Okonkwo is the foil of Unaka. Okonkwo is the foil of Unaka. Okonkwo is the foil of Unaka. Unaka. Okonkwo is the foil of Unaka. Okay? So who has read Things Fall Apart? Who? Who has read Things Fall Apart? No one? You? Okay. So what's the relationship between Okonkwo and Unaka? Unaka is Okonkwo's father. You get it? Okay. So, while Okonkwo is hardworking and successful, serious man in life, Unaka is a lazy, pleasure-loving, and an unsuccessful man. So that's why we say that Okonkwo is the foil of Unaka, because they are in sharp contrast, opposite one another. Okay, let's look at points of view. Point of view refers to the vantage point from which the narrator tells the story. Point of view refers to the vantage point. Vantage point. V-A-N-T-A-G-E. The vantage point. Vantage point from which the narrator tells the story. That is where the narrator stays to tell the story. Where the narrator stays to tell the story. So, in discussing this, we have to know that we have the first person narrative point of view. We have the first person narrative point of view. We have the second person narrative point of view. We have the second person narrative point of view. And we have the third person narrative point of view. We also have stream of consciousness. Stream of consciousness. Stream. S-T-R-E-A-M. Stream of consciousness. So let us start with the first person narrative point of view. You can also call him the first person narrator. The word first person is taken from the first person pronoun, because that is what we use to identify the first person narrator. The first person pronoun. The first person pronouns are I and we. I and we. So you know that the story makes use of the first person narrative point of view when the narrator says I or we. You know that the work makes use of the first person narrative point of view when the narrator says I or we. Now the implication in this is that the narrator is a character in the story. The narrator is part of the story. The narrator is in the story. The narrator is one of the characters in the story. The narrator is one of the characters in the story. He is giving us an eyewitness account. The narrator is giving us an eyewitness account. Because this means that he was present when the story occurred, when the event narrated occurred. So the first person narrative point of view gives an eyewitness account to the event, or the eyewitness account of the events in the story. So an eyewitness account is what we need when something happens. We need to know that someone was there and is telling us exactly what he or she saw. That is one advantage about this story. It is this point of view. It is highly believable. It's highly believable. Because the person who tells it from the point of view of someone who was there when the event happened. It's highly plausible. Plausible. P-L-A-U-S-I-B-L-E. Highly plausible. It is likely to be believed because the person was there. But the first person narrator has a disadvantage. In the sense that it is not objective. It may not be objective. One disadvantage is that it might not be objective. That means it's likely to be biased in the telling of the story. The narrator is likely to be biased in the telling of the story since he's part of the story. One of the characters in the story, a party in the story. He or she is likely to tell the story to favor himself, or his cause, or his party. He or she is likely to tell the story to favor himself, or his cause, or his party, or his side. So it's not likely to be objective. Whenever something happens, people always say what happened in such a way as to justify themselves. So that's why this narrator is not an objective narrator. The person is likely to tell the story to glorify himself, to exonerate himself. Then this narrator is limited. The first person narrator is limited. It's a limited narrator. The first person narrator is a limited narrator. Limited. The first person narrator is limited in the sense that he or she can only tell what he or she saw at the moment. Because it doesn't have what it takes to go into the minds of the character to see motives. It's limited in that sense. It doesn't have what it takes to get into the mind of the character to see the motives of the character. Then his narration is limited. The character does not know everything. The narrator does not know everything. That is the problem with this narrator. He does not know everything. He can only tell what he sees at that moment. Doesn't know what happened before or what will happen after. Doesn't know motives. Can't get into the mind of the reader. He's not everywhere. Let's look at the second person narrative point of view. This narrator is rarely used. It's not that popular, but there are some works that have made use of it. The second person narrator is rare, but there are some works that have made use of it. And sometimes the usage is incidental, not in a complete work of literature, but just incidental, maybe a portion of the text and make use of it. It is denoted by the use of the second person pronoun, you. It is denoted by the use of the second person pronoun, you. Now this you can be used in two ways. This you can be used in two ways. One way is that it can refer to the narrator when the narrator does not want to mention himself or herself in the story. One is that it can refer to the narrator when the narrator does not want to mention himself or herself in the story. When the narrator wants to create an artistic distance between himself and the story being told. You can use you, but that you refers to the narrator. Okay? In another way is that the you can refer to someone else. That means the narrator is talking about another person outside himself. So those are the two major ways that you can be used. You can be used in a second person narrative point of view. One way is that the you can refer to the narrator where the narrator does not want to use I to mention himself as telling the story, where he wants to create an artistic distance between the story and himself. And another instance where the you can refer to another person outside the narrator. The narrator is talking about another person, so it's a you were there. And let's just talk about the third person narrative point of view. So the third person narrative point of view is denoted by the third person pronouns like he, she, it, they. The implication of the third person narrative point of view is that the narrator is not a character in the story. The narrator is outside the story. The narrator is not a character in the story. The narrator is actually outside the story. That's why using he, she, they, saying I'm not a monk, I'm just a detached outsider, telling the story based on what I know. Okay? So because he's not part of the story, he's likely to be objective. So this is what we call objective narrator. The objective narrator is the third person narrator because he's not part of the story. He's likely to tell the story the way it is without fear or favor. Because he's not part of the story. Okay? Unlike the first person narrator, who is a part of the story and will likely tell the story to support his side. Okay? Another thing that we didn't mention about the first person narrator is that the narrator is predictable. The narration is predictable. There's no suspense. There's hardly suspense in the first person narrative point of view because the narrator cannot die. If the narrator dies, then no one will tell the story. So that means that whatever dangers he finds himself in, he somehow will survive. We know already that he will somehow survive, otherwise he will tell the story. So there's no suspense in the first person narrative point of view because the character is a narrator, and if he dies, no one will tell the story. So we know that even if some people point guns at him, he will find a way to survive because the story has to be told. So there's really no suspense that's another disadvantage of the first person narrator. But all those disadvantages are handled in the third person narrative point of view. In the first place, we've established that in the third person point of view, narrative point of view, you are likely to have objectivity, because the narrator is not a character in the story, not one of the characters in the story. And then another name for the third person narrator is omniscient narrator. Omniscient narrator. So when we say that God is omniscient, what does it mean? It means that God is all-knowing. So this is the same attribute. The same attribute that this narrator has. When we say that this is an omniscient narrator, that means he knows everything. He knows the past, he knows the present. He can get into the mind of the character, can read people's mind, the character's mind. He knows motives, and we're able to tell the story in a better way compared to the first person narrator, who only narrates what he sees without knowing what the character is thinking. So please take note of that. So the omniscient narrator is everywhere, knows everything about the character. And so you'll be able to tell the story with motives, with wider perspectives, because it can be everywhere at any time. You can get into the mind of the character to know what the character is thinking and planning. Whereas the first person narrator cannot do that. He can only speculate. Right? You do more than that. There is suspense in this narration because anybody can die. The narrator is outside the story, and so anyone, even the hero, can die. Even the hero can die. Anyone can die. So there is suspense in this story, compared to the first person narrator, where you know that the hero, the narrator, will not die, because after all, if he dies, the story will end. So the story will not end, so he will not die. So in writing your work, in writing prose, in writing your novel, in writing your short story, you need to choose a suitable narrator for your story. You need to choose a suitable narrative point of view for your story. You need to choose a suitable narrative point of view for your story. Your choice should be based on some of the issues that we have raised about each of these narratives. And again, when you pick up a work of art to read, you should be able to also identify which narrative point of view the author has utilized. Stream of consciousness is an aspect of the third person narrative point of view. An aspect of the third person narrative point of view. In this point of view, the narrator narrates the story using the thought processes of the character. The narrator tells the story using the thought processes of the character. That means the narrator is able to get into the mind of the reader and know what the character is thinking, and then narrates that thought to us directly. That's what we mean by stream of consciousness. That means as the character's thought is flowing, the narrator is telling us exactly the thoughts of the character as the story. So the narrator narrates to us what the character is thinking. And what the character is thinking forms the story. in the stream of consciousness. In stream of consciousness, it is the character's thought that forms the story, because the character's thought is narrated directly to us. The character's thoughts are narrated directly to us, because the omniscient narrator is able to get into the mind of the character and tell us the story directly based on the thought processes of the character. There's a difference between theme and subject matter. The subject matter is what the work of art is all about. The subject matter is what the work of art is all about. Which can be stated in one or two sentences. Which can be stated in one or two sentences. What the work of art is all about, and it can be stated in one or two sentences. After you read the work, you can decide the subject matter of the work. That is, what is the work all about? So the subject matter of the work of art is usually one, at most two, and it can be stated in one or two sentences, period. Things Fall Apart is about the invasion of Igbo land by the colonial masters and their culture, period. That's the subject matter. Okay? Themes in a work of art are many and varied. Themes, on the other hand, are many and are varied. Themes are many and varied. V-A-R-I-E-D, varied. And they refer to the central messages in the story. They refer to the central messages in the story. Their themes refer to the central ideas, the important ideas, the messages the author sends across through the story being told. Remember that there are no innocent stories. There are no innocent stories. There are no innocent stories. Stories are not just told for their own sake. The author tells a particular story because he wants to send across certain ideas, certain messages to the reader. So stories are ideologically charged. Stories are what? Ideologically charged. Stories are ideologically charged. That means there are messages, there are ideals, there are philosophies in the stories we are being told. And when you want to look at the themes of the story, you are bringing out the messages, these ideas, these messages, these philosophies from the story. Some stories promote honesty. Some stories promote honesty. Some stories promote resilience. Some stories promote loyalty. Some stories promote love and unity, and so on and so forth. So these are the themes that can be taken from the story. Love, hatred, deception, hope. So the ideas that we draw from stories are the themes. Themes are not usually mentioned in one word. A theme of a work can say, love is painful. Love goes with themes. That's what themes in works of art, that's how they read. Life is full of sorrow. Nothing comes easy in life. These are themes that can be drawn from stories. So we have timeless and universal themes. We have timeless and universal themes. Timeless and universal themes. We have timeless and universal themes. We have timeless and universal themes. Themes are said to be timeless when they continue to be relevant despite the passage of time. Themes are said to be timeless when they continue to be relevant, when they continue to appear in works of literature, and they continue to be talked about after the passage of time. That means the passage of time does not change them, does not alter them, does not erase them from human memory or human literary discourses. So some themes are timeless and universal, meaning that these themes were there in the past, are still there today, and will always be there. They are timeless. Timeless themes have always been there, are still there, and will always be there. And then themes are universal when they are everywhere. When they are everywhere. And they are known by all peoples of the earth. Themes are universal when they can be found among all the peoples of the earth. Everywhere you go, you find these themes. All cultures, all countries, all nations, all races have these themes in their stories. They are universal themes. Okay? And so some of the timeless and universal themes that we have in human literary discourses are love and hatred. They have always been there, they are still there, and will always be there. The theme of death, or the theme of life and death, that constitutes the timeless and universal themes. The theme of jealousy was there right from the time of Cain and Abel, and are still here with us today, and will always be with us. So it will do you a world of good. Writers who focus on the timeless themes in literature are writers who remain relevant throughout literary history. So you take that into consideration as a creative writer. You must infuse into your work some of these timeless and universal themes. Alright, like the theme of death. People have died before, people are still dying, and people will continue to die as far as they remain in the mortal body. Then we have historically specific themes. Themes that are drawn from history. We have historically specific themes. These are themes that are based on historical events, like slavery, the theme of slavery, the theme of colonialism, theme of slavery, theme of colonialism, theme of war. Theme of war can be timeless and universal because war has always been part of man, but sometimes the theme of war can be historical if it refers to a particular war in human history. Theme of war. So when you are writing a story as a creative writer, you must tell the story to infuse the relevant themes of your time. You must tell the story to infuse the relevant themes of your time. Once you are writing a story in today's world, I would like you to think of the themes that you want to raise in your work. The things that are relevant today. Okay? So before we go on to story selection and the project and writing the story, let us talk about language and style. Let's talk about language and style. And in talking about language and style, I want to emphasize the literary language as that which is different from ordinary, everyday language. Okay? So the language of literature, language of creative writing, is creative and imaginative. It is not like the everyday language. This is because the creative writer talks about ordinary things in extraordinary ways. The creative writer strives to talk about ordinary things in extraordinary ways. That is the creative writer's way of using language. So, the language of literature is the language of creative writing is figurative in nature. The language of creative writing, the language of literature is figurative in nature. That means the author should try as much as possible to infuse literary tropes in the language. To infuse literary tropes in the language. Literary tropes, T-R-O-P-E-S, in the language. You should try to infuse literary tropes in your use of language. So the language of literature should be rich in metaphor and simile. The language of literature should be rich in metaphors and similes. As well as other figures of speech. So you don't use ordinary language in writing literature. Your language must be rich with tropes of literature, like metaphors and similes, and other figures of speech, like personification. Irony. Laitotes. Which is the use of a negative expression to express something positive. The use of a negative expression to express something positive. Like, you're not looking bad in that dress. You're not looking badly in that dress. Meaning you look good in the dress. But I use a negative way of saying something positive. Right? So you said, so how was my performance in the test? And I said, you didn't do badly. That means you did good. Or someone asks you, how is everything? I said not bad means it's good. Things are good. But you are doing it using litotes. He is a man of no mean reputation. That means he has a high reputation. That's litotism. But using no mean reputation is a negative way of saying something positive. He's a man of no small standing. That's litotes. Euphemism. Euphemism. Using a mild expression to say something unpleasant. Something that will be unpleasant if you don't use the euphemistic route. Doctors use euphemism a lot because they don't want to kill two people at the same time. They don't want two people to die at the same time. Okay? For instance, you are in Lagos, you've been in Lagos for 20 years, you've not come home. And then one day they call you and say, brother, you should try and come home. Daddy is very, very sick. Alright? Maybe the person has already died. But they don't want to tell you. They say he's very, very sick, that you should come home. Okay? And then when the person has finally died, the doctor will say, we tried all our best, but he could not make it. He could not make it. Alright? He passed away. Alright? His breath is last. Okay? Not brother, daddy has died. That's how some of you report news. Okay, because you're not mature enough to know how to use euphemism to say what that unpleasant news. That's what you're saying. Brother, daddy has died. Daddy is dead. So what are you saying? Daddy is dead. Right? Right? You're supposed to use a mild, you are supposed to be euphemistic in your use of language in talking about such unpleasant things. Okay? So it's not only in reporting deaths. There are other areas of life that we use euphemism all the time, especially taboo subject matter. When we want to talk about taboo subject matter, they use euphemism to talk about it. Okay? So you need to be armed with euphemism. Personification, like someone will say, the glass of water was standing on the table, looking attractive and calling my attention. Okay, let me not use the glass of water, but it makes sense. Standing on the table suggests personification because of the attribute of standing. Okay? Or when I got home from school, I was very hungry, and I saw a plate of jollof rice with chicken on daddy's table, and the plate was calling my attention. Okay, and that is personification. You are not using ordinary everyday language. The way you use language, the language is lively. You can see how the plate of rice has life. Okay, you even get to a point of calling your attention as if it's a human being. That's how writers use language. Okay, and people will enjoy reading stories like that. Stories written in that kind of language. Because the language is lively. Synecdoche. Okay? So, the use of a part to represent the whole and vice versa. That's why when we started, I first of all introduced you to notes on selected literary terms. That's on my website. Okay? So, or metonymy, which does not mention a thing by its direct name, but a name that is often associated with that thing. That's metonymy. You use a name that's associated with something to call that thing instead of the real name of the thing. For instance, if you say, have you read Shoinka? Have you read Shoinka? So what that simply means is, have you read books written by Shoinka? Okay? Because Shoinka is a writer. Have you read Achebe? Have you listened to what Aso Rock said this morning? Aso Rock made a statement this morning. Aso Rock there is a metonymy referring to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. They are the president of the country. Okay? So you need to arm yourself with literary language. You need to arm yourself with literary language as a creative writer. You need to arm yourself with literary language as a creative writer. You need to know what these languages are. Okay? Like metaphor. What is metaphor?
Direct comparison. Direct comparison.
Can someone give us an example of a metaphor?
She's a girl.
Okay, good. What's the difference between a metaphor and simile?
One is direct, one is
The simile makes use of as or like in the comparison. Metaphor does not use as or like. So, one thing you should note about metaphors is that they have 3 parts. Metaphors have how many parts?
3 parts.
Metaphors have 3 parts. We have the tenor, the vehicle, and the ground. The tenor, the vehicle, and the ground. Metaphor has 3 parts: the tenor, the vehicle, and the ground. So the tenor, T-E-N-O-R, the tenor contains the subject of the metaphor. The tenor is the subject of the metaphor. The tenor is the subject of the metaphor. The vehicle is that through whose agency the tenor is explained or understood. It is the part that explains the tenor, that the tenor is compared to. It's the part that the tenor is compared to. The vehicle is that through whose agency the tenor is explained or understood. For instance, if we have the metaphor, Jesus is the way, or Jesus is the bread of life. Let's use Jesus is the bread of life. Jesus is the bread of life. Jesus is the tenor, the subject of the metaphor. And bread of life is the vehicle. Bread of life is the vehicle. Because it is that through which we understand the tenor. Okay? And then the ground refers to the relationship that exists between the tenor and the vehicle. The ground refers to the relationship that exists between the tenor and the vehicle. What links the two of them together? So in this context, the ground is that Jesus is food for the hungry. Jesus is food to the hungry. Metaphors have types. Metaphors have types. We have types of metaphor. We have dead metaphor. Dead metaphor. D-E-A-D. Dead metaphor. We have implied metaphor. Implied metaphor. I-M-P-L-I-E-D. Implied metaphor. We have extended metaphor. We have extended metaphor. So dead metaphors are cliches. Dead metaphors are cliches. Cliches. Have you ever heard of cliches? C-L-I-C-H-E-S. Cliches. C-L-I-C-H-E-S. Cliches. 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 Cliches are overused expressions. Cliches are overused expressions. Cliches are overused expressions. They are expressions that have lost their effectiveness through overuse. People have said it over and over again, so it doesn't have any fresh effect on anyone again when it is said. In essay writing, we normally ask students to avoid cliches. That means those overused expressions that no longer have effect on people. Like the youth are the leaders of tomorrow. The youth are the leaders of tomorrow. It's a cliche. Is it the first time you are hearing it? No. You heard it over and over again. It doesn't have effect on you again. Okay? So dead metaphors are metaphors that have been used over time, so they don't have effect again on the reader. They are dead. So they have become trite. T-R-I-T-E. Trite. That means they have become ineffective because of repeated use. You can also call them frozen metaphor. You can also call them frozen metaphor. You can also call them frozen metaphor or historical metaphor. You can also call them frozen metaphor or historical metaphor. Let's talk about implied metaphor. Implied metaphor. Implied metaphor does not have the conventional structure of the metaphor, where you have the tenor and then the vehicle. Implied metaphor does not have the conventional structure of the metaphor, where you have the tenor clearly, then you have the vehicle clearly. So in implied metaphor, the metaphor is implied based on how the words are used in an expression. So the comparison is not obvious in an implied metaphor. The comparison is not obvious in implied metaphor. I'll give you an example. The soldier roared at the civilians. The soldier roared at the civilian. Roared is spelled R-O-A-R-E-D. Roared at the civilian. Underline the word roared. So the implied metaphor there is that the soldier is compared to a lion. The soldier is compared to what? A lion. So the metaphor is implied because we don't say the soldier is a lion, but we simply say the soldier roared at the civilian. Roaring is the act, something that lions can do. So the comparison is implied that the soldier is a lion. Okay? Or you could say the woman backed instructions at the children. The woman backed instructions at the children. Backed is B-A-R-K-E-D. The woman backed instructions at the children. So in that example, we don't say the woman is a dog, but we only say the woman backed instructions at the children, which is what a dog does. Dog barks. So the woman is indirectly being compared to the dog. So the metaphor is implied by virtue of how the words are used in that expression. So that's what we mean by implied metaphor. Look at extended metaphor. We'll stop there and you go and read the rest on notes on selected literary terms. An extended metaphor is called conceit. Conceit. An extended metaphor is called conceit. C-O-N-C-E-I-T. Conceit. It's also called sustained metaphor. It's also called sustained metaphor. It's also called sustained metaphor. Sustained metaphor. This is because the author sustains the comparison for a considerable length in the literature, in the work of literature. That means this kind of metaphor is not one sentence, not two sentences, but they are sustained throughout a work of art, or for a long time in a work of art, meaning that the vehicles and the tenor keeps changing. The vehicle and the tenor keeps changing. They run into several sentences or passages. The metaphor is sustained for a considerable length in the passage. So it's not one sentence, not two sentences. It is found in most parts of the text. That's what I mean by extended metaphor. Okay, so this is where we're going to stop our class for today. See you again next week.